Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider. Back to Basics, Part 1, What is a Woman? Before we get started this week, I apologize if there winds up being some extra background noise. I am in the process of moving, and I'm going to be staying with my brother and sister-in-law, who are both wonderful people, for a couple of months. So there may be some additional household noises while I'm in the process of transitioning to my new place. And I apologize if I'm a little lacking in life today. It's been kind of an exhausting process, especially with health problems. So I hope you'll hang in there with me. But let's get started. What is a woman? That question has come to define the era we have just lived through. It seems to be true that this era is drawing to a close, but perhaps it is time to take a more serious look at the question that has become a punchline and attempt to go a little bit deeper. Yes, a woman is an adult human female. That is true. And if you need more detail, then I will further state that the female of any species is the biological sex that produces the large reproductive cell known as the egg. It's that simple. Everyone who doesn't find it appealing to take ludicrous culture war stands, or who doesn't struggle with an overly simplistic mind, understands the basic reality of life perfectly well. It's true that some women have conditions that restrict their ability to reproduce, but they are still part of the biological sex that is capable of becoming pregnant, as opposed to the male sex, which simply cannot do so. No matter how outraged some people may become over the idea that just because they are willing to scream certain things at the top of their lungs doesn't make them real, simply because you're determined to be loud and stubborn. After all, no one would argue that a textbook specimen of the human species would have 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers, 10 toes, etc. But even if a baby is born with 11 toes, that doesn't mean that the baby isn't human. It means that it was born with an abnormal deformity. But that abnormality doesn't change what it is. We all still recognize that the baby is a member of the human species, deformity and all. Likewise, a woman who doesn't menstruate or who can't have children isn't any less of a woman. She just has a condition that is an anomaly. The fact that she has an abnormal condition that deviates from the standard doesn't make her a man any more than a baby with 11 toes would be considered to be a centipede. I think most people out there who have rational minds understand this pretty simple concept. We all know that it is really only the people who have allowed their grip on reality to become dependent on their religious devotion to their preferred doctrine about the world who are confused about things that preschoolers intuitively understand. Society has now spent enough time focusing on those people. The kindergarten-level questions of our age have been answered repeatedly by this point, and the information is out there for them when they are ready to hear it. As for the rest of us, it's time to move on and stop letting ourselves be limited to the ABC basics of life just because some people remain stuck there for the time being. They'll catch up eventually, and life is far too short to take it at their pace if you don't have to. So let's give ourselves permission to begin exploring the questions that are meaningful to us and move on into deeper, richer waters. It's time to mull over the heart of the question that has been trivialized into memes. What is a woman? We've been told so many lies on this subject that it is hard to know which one to attack first. Obviously, some women are extremely feminine and others are rugged and outdoorsy. Either way, they are both fully women. Personality doesn't change biology, and neither does individual behavior. I suppose that means that the obvious Jenga block to remove first is the lie that women are just like men. I hate to break it to everyone, but they most definitely are not. I know this is a popular pet theory for a lot of people, but they have actually met a few women firsthand, right? Women are many things, but being carbon copies of men is definitely not one of them. And that's a good thing. So there's no need for anyone to get their panties in a twist. The generation of women who were raised on Lara Croft Tomb Raiders movies and female empowerment superhero flicks may honestly believe that a 110-pound chick is going to send a guy the size of Chris Hemsworth flying across the room when she punches him. But there is a reason that you'll only ever see that in fantasies. In reality, a guy that size wouldn't even have to put out the effort to fight a typical woman in order to completely overpower her. If he took her to the ground and then went limp like a toddler, there's no way that she could even budge a guy Hemsworth's size, much less hurt him. No, I'm sorry, boys and girls, but what actually happens when a girl the size of Scarlett Johansson punches a guy the size of Chris Hemsworth in the face is that she breaks her hand, and he gets angry and beats the life out of her with his. Teaching young girls otherwise isn't empowering them, it's endangering them. Being overconfident in the face of reality is not a good thing. Telling a kid that he could beat up The Rock may make him feel really powerful and good about himself, but that confidence wouldn't be justified in reality. So if your well-intentioned lies led to him stupidly taking on The Rock in the mistaken belief that there is even a chance that he will come out on top, then you haven't helped that kid, you've set him up. Strangely, that is exactly the kind of lie that society has agreed to condescendingly tell women, all while pretending that it is somehow virtuous and even beneficial for them to do so. In the real world, where we all actually live, it is much safer to be aware of the limits that are imposed on you by reality, so that you can do what you need to do in order to avoid dangerous situations, knowing that they probably won't end very well for you. It is actually dangerous to believe the patronizing lie that you would hold your own in that scenario, and then you end up overconfidently blundering right into it. And when it comes to the adage that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, that's another fun lie that we love to repeat. How true was that little quip for the women who have found themselves outmatched by a dangerous, aggressive male? A man who was raised right and who wouldn't just keep walking as he left a woman in danger is actually a very useful thing for a woman in that position to have. And if that truth ruffles some feathers, then so be it. But I think that every woman who has ever had to face violence from a man would agree with my sentiments. I think that they would have given an awful lot to have a good man step in between them and that violence when that moment was occurring. I certainly would. So maybe it's time to consider the truth, which is that we should agree to stop telling pretty lies and be real with each other instead. Isn't it better to know where we truly stand than it is to build our entire lives on foundations that turn out to be illusions which will crumble beneath our feet exactly when we most need them? How is setting someone up to experience that doing anyone a kindness? We each only get one life, and none of us make it out of this world alive. So we can either waste our one and only life pretending that we're all playing a harmless game of charades, when deep down we know that we're actually playing high-stakes Russian roulette, and then performatively declare ourselves to be shocked and horrified when somebody gets their head blown off trying to mime out a movie title. Or we can decide to grow up and figure out what we're doing and then adapt in order for everyone to successfully survive. Unfortunately, most of the lies that we feed our young girls aren't as simple to eradicate as that first example is. If they were, the world would have fewer miserable women in it, but sadly, some lies are more subtle than others are. We have been told that women need to achieve complete freedom, and that will be the greatest source of their happiness. And nowhere have we been told this more than when it comes to our sexual freedom. Supposedly, the freer we are to do whatever we want to do in any given moment, with whoever we theoretically want to do it with at the time, the happier we will all be. But once again, the results out here in the real world simply do not live up to the lies that women have been told concerning the way that they are wired by thousands of years of evolution. I'm going to say something extremely controversial right now, so brace yourself. But women aren't their brothers. That is actually okay. They don't need to be just like their brothers to be valuable contributions to the world. Contrary to the message that is preached by today's feminists, women don't actually need to become men in order to thrive and be happy. We don't need to become men in an attempt to beat them at their own game. One, that will never work. The counterfeit will never be worth as much as the original. And two, women have their own game, and it's a game that's worth playing. We just need to stop letting other people make us feel ashamed of doing that. Their proposition, on the other hand, doesn't hold up. Women are more free today than ever before to be with anyone that they want to be with as casually as any man can hook up, with absolutely no judgment directed at them from society for doing so. And somehow, the result of our supposed liberation is that women are miserable and feel lost. They have terrible self-esteem while suffering from all sorts of mental and emotional disorders. Many women who want to be in a relationship are not able to successfully create one, and the rest have apparently settled for lying to themselves about not wanting a relationship in the first place. They've turned their whole existence into a cosplaying display of fealty to the feminist cause, which they use to try to convince themselves that they chose their empty life in the hope that they will eventually be happy in it. It is sad to witness this. They pretend to be leading full lives, centered around the successful careers that all good little feminists are supposed to want, while most of them not so secretly hate their jobs. Is that your idea of being liberated? Because it's not mine. And when it comes to relationships, if people are more free than ever before to engage in an endless variety of relationships, and they have access to more people to choose from than ever before via the internet and dating apps, as opposed to the limited options that previous generations of women had, who were basically limited to the men in their immediate vicinity, then how is it possible that all of the free little birdies in our superior society are failing to achieve the very basic goal of being in the successful relationships that most of them want to be in deep down? If we are the lucky ones who have been unchained from the kitchen, as we are relentlessly told, if we are the ones who have the privilege of getting to live in this supposedly utopian environment for women, where we are all completely liberated, then why do the fruits of that existence taste so bitter to so many women? Thomas Sowell was correct when he said that much of the social history of the Western world over the past 3 decades has involved replacing what worked with what sounded good. In this case, being theoretically free to do whatever you want to do, with whoever you want to do it with, in any context that you choose, has produced a feeling of being trapped, rather than a feeling of being free. So, as a woman, you have a choice. You can either choose to prioritize some influencer's pet theories, or you can choose to prioritize the quality of the results that those theories have produced in your own life. But one of those things has to take priority over the other. So the question is, would you rather be right, or would you rather be happy? Are you willing to live a life that makes you miserable in order to back an ideology that appeals to you, and devote your short time on this spinning ball to being a loyal supporter of the cause, dutifully propping up the lies and repeating them to more women? Or does your own day-to-day existence matter more to you than being a good soldier in the feminist army does? Once you've answered that question, try this one on for size. Does the quality of your day-to-day life matter to you enough for you to choose whatever you determine is best for you, even if that goes against the grain and results in you having to listen to the criticism that you're being disloyal to someone else's cause as though they own you to begin with. I know, for example, that I'm theoretically supposed to feel some sort of loyalty to the sisterhood, but I'm sorry, I just don't. My one and only life is more valuable to me than having devotion to any of the causes in today's world is. To be honest, most of them are tedious and boring anyway. But even when it comes to the ones that I do feel passionately about, it's more important to make sure that other people know that they have a choice when it comes to staying in the cages that our society has constructed for them. And yes, shining a light on their other options matters more to me than some stranger's demand that I must be loyal to an ideology that I happen to disagree with. Other women are completely free to reverse those priorities in their own lives if they make that choice, but they will not get me to reverse them in my life. That's just the way it is. With that said, women have been lied to more than just about anyone else when it comes to issues like these, and they have mostly been lied to by other women. I know that it's way more fun to blame the patriarchy for everything that's wrong in our lives, but I happen to think that women are grown-ups, and as such, they have to be responsible for their own decisions like big girls. They have free will just like everyone else does, and that means that they are responsible for their decisions, whether good or bad, and they are responsible for the advice that they choose to follow, whether it was good or bad. But having free will also means that we can change course and do whatever works for us at any time that we decide to. The sexual revolution was supposed to primarily free women. After all, men were already mostly free to indulge their sexual instincts as long as they kept it within reasonable limits and were somewhat discreet about it. They never faced the same level of judgment that women did for violating society's expectations when it came to sex, but it simply was and remains a lie to claim that women are exactly like men in the first place. We're not. I hate to burst everyone's pretty pink bubble, but as women, we are wired differently than men are. Left to our own devices, if we are not subjected to the constant indoctrination telling us otherwise, most women prioritize things quite a bit differently than a hormonal young male of the species does. And I don't think that we should feel obligated to perform or pretend to want things that we don't actually want in order to be considered acceptable by other judgy women. The real misogyny in today's world is coming from those women. They think that the women who want to act on their actual desires have no real value in this world. They think that women should all feel obligated to try to make themselves more like men, because only masculine women have value in their eyes. And these new misogynistic feminists believe that their ideology should be allowed to control all women and tell them what they are allowed to want. And yes, I know that the feminists out there are all clutching their pearls right now, grinding their teeth and screwing up their bitter little faces into appropriate expressions of their disapproval because I'm making these all too true accusations. But once they unclench, they'll live. I'm not telling anyone else how they have to live their life. They can do exactly what they want to do, and they will. These feminists are allowed to go on making their case, which will, unfortunately, go on convincing some young women to follow their lead. But I am equally entitled to point out that the things that they promote are often misleading, not to mention insulting. And I'm allowed to point out the potential consequences of following their precious pet theories to the women who are considering taking that gamble. After that, the chips will fall where they may. Each woman will have to decide for themselves what makes sense to them and how much of their own happiness they are willing to risk. But if I'm just supposed to remain silent so that no one ever questions how the fairy tales coming from someone living in an ideological ivory tower will actually play out in the real world, then I'm sorry, but I won't be doing what you want me to. And the chips will fall where they may on that too. The idea that most women are going to find happiness or feel valuable as a human being by indulging every fleeting whim that they temporarily experience, with no thought given to whether acting on that desire will be worth it to them in the long run, is just not true. Most women do not truly want to spend their entire lives having casual sex with random strangers, and never having anything more meaningful than that. Anyone who's ever met a woman knows that for the majority of them, I'm right about that. So, this idea that the way for a woman to find a serious relationship with one man is to have lots of casual sex with lots of different men makes no sense right on its face. You become what you practice. We all do. I didn't make the rules, but I can observe the realities about how they end up working out. And I'm just sharing what I've observed from my vantage point with whoever is interested in my thoughts on the subject. And based on my observations, if you want a serious committed relationship, then you have to date seriously, with a solid commitment to finding what you are actually looking for. If you date casually and without high standards, then you'll get a casual relationship with a low-quality man. You get what you're looking for. And when it comes to the argument that I'll just stay with him until someone better comes along, I can only say that forks in the road have consequences. The choices that you make do end up affecting the road that you will be on, and high-quality men aren't going to be found on the same road that you're traveling down with Mr. Placeholder. The sad reality is that if you treat yourself like a piece of meat and invite others to do the same thing, then you will end up feeling like a piece of meat and being victimized by the sociopaths who will take you up on your offer and use you accordingly. And you are not going to feel good about yourself afterwards. You're just not. I don't make the rules, but I don't choose to bloody my forehead running into the brick wall of reality either. And when it comes to the high-quality men out there, they are not going to see you as a woman who values herself if you thoughtlessly toss yourself to every dog that you meet like you're nothing more than a Scooby snack. You'll get exactly what you're fishing for. Sociopaths. Scientific studies show that the only men that are looking for one-night stands instead of real relationships are the dark triad types, users, manipulators, and narcissists. And if you think that you're going to find a high-quality man by fishing in the waters of that cesspool, then to quote Tom MacDonald, that's like sleeping with the football team to try to be a virgin. But for some reason, women today seem to feel an insane level of obligation to stuff down their own unhappiness and their own negative feelings about their worth in order to play along and put on the pre-approved performance that society expects from them. They do this partly because they believe the same performance when it's put on by other women, and they believe that the way that they are feeling about their own experience is some strange anomaly, one that they should feel ashamed of and try to repress and hide in order not to be viewed as strange and different from everyone else, which would lead to them being rejected. But you know what? If feeling the way that I truly do makes me weird, then I can live with that. And when it comes to rejection, I've definitely survived worse. Women also go along with this pressure to keep up the pretenses because, sadly, they falsely believe that this is as good as life gets. If they are feeling miserable with all of this freedom, then how much more miserable will they be if they end up being even less free than they are right now? What hellhole awaits if they choose to give up some of their freedom to look for something more? This fear of the unknown and the fear of being looked down on and rejected causes many women to cling to the very shackles that are preventing them from having what they actually want deep down. And for the most part, the people who are standing in the way of women being able to talk honestly with each other about whatever they may want are some of the other women. Take Cardi B, for example. I'm just going to say it. Her song, WAP, is disgusting. I don't mean it's vulgar and offensive, even though it is both of those things. I mean it's gross. It is trigger your gag reflex gross. She spent the entire music video writhing around like a professional porn star. If that video and those lyrics had been a man's idea, it would have been universally condemned as being a Harvey Weinstein-level exploitation of women. But somehow it's okay for a woman to exploit women. And it's even celebrated as female empowerment for her to do so. But encouraging young women to sell their bodies for tuition money is exploiting them, whether it's being done by a man or by a woman. I refuse to indulge in these hypocritical double standards just because someone else thinks that I'm obligated to support everything that anyone with an XX chromosome does. That video wasn't female empowerment, and y'all know it. You know how I know you know it? Because none of you set your daughters down and said to them, "Here, sweetie, watch this. This is how you should behave tomorrow at school in front of the boys so that they'll see you as an empowered woman and treat you with respect." None of you set your sons down either and said, "Here, Timmy, this is what a woman is, and this is how you should think of them. This is what an empowered woman is. This is how you treat her, exactly like this woman is treating herself. When you think about the value that a woman has as a human being, picture this. Not one of you did that. So can we stop playing games and pretending to be offended when someone points out the truth that the Empress has no clothes? It's time for this culture of being mutually expected to lie to each other all the time to stop. Who is this performance for anyway? Who does it really help? Who has it actually hurt? Why can't we just shoot straight and be real for a change? It would probably be healthier for everyone involved if we did. I've met women who regularly say things that I'm convinced that they don't actually mean. And the weirdest part is that they repeat these things without even seeming to stop and question if they actually feel that way. It's a very strange thing to witness. I've heard women say that they wish they were a man with a dick, even though they would not really choose to be a man if they could. But they apparently feel the need to claim that it is true, even though it isn't. I've heard other women say that they wish they were lesbians, even if they happen to be women who are wildly attracted to men and very much enjoy being heterosexual. Other women will say that they are proud of sleeping around and that it has been the source of so much fun in their life. But it seems like they wouldn't actually feel the need to make that claim, that they feel pride in their choice, if it wasn't all a knee-jerk reaction to feelings that are the exact opposite of pride. And despite all of the fun that they claim to have had, they will also admit to being very unhappy in their day-to-day life. As though those two things aren't in any way linked. It's a very strange cycle of self-denialism that women as a whole have fallen prey to, and many of them seem determined to continue inflicting this misery on each other. I think that subconsciously they know that they are obligated to make these claims, however untrue they are, so they dutifully toss them out there without even hearing them. And most of them seem determined to continue perpetuating this cycle of obligatory performances by women, even if it makes us all miserable in the process. I'll give one example of a woman's determination to persist in doing what she clearly does not feel good about doing. Normally, I wouldn't have even known about a story like this, but it was being talked about a lot on the internet a few months ago, and I think it's worth looking at in this light. There is a young woman on OnlyFans who recently got a lot of attention for succeeding in her self-imposed challenge to have sex with 100 men in 24 hours. That was followed by a different woman who succeeded in getting a world record by having sex with 1,000 men in 24 hours. Let me be clear. OnlyFans and the women who participate in it lie to other young women by telling them that this is an easy way for them to make extra money with no strings attached. They claim that the only problem with prostituting yourself for money, in the traditional sense, is the pimp who would control you. They say that removing the middleman and pimping yourself out instead leaves you completely in control. That is partially true, but only partially and only conditionally. The implication is that being in control of your actions is the same thing as being in control of where they will take you. And that part is a lie. It turns out that most of the women who get involved in a life of pornography end up feeling and being trapped by the stigma that is associated with that choice. And a trap is just as powerful when it's constructed by you as it is when someone else sets it. This young woman clearly demonstrated that problem. When asked about achieving her goal afterward, she appeared to be what can only be described as broken by the experience. She couldn't hold back the tears as she said that she kind of felt like a prostitute. And given that a prostitute is someone who has sex with strangers in exchange for profiting financially, then I'm sure that having sex with 100 strangers in order to sell internet subscriptions would make her feel exactly like a prostitute. That result shouldn't really be that big of a surprise to anyone, but apparently it was. Many people, including myself, felt very sorry for this young woman and for what she had done to herself. Many people felt that the damage done to her was the result of exploitation, and I agree with them. But who exploited her? Herself, for one. Her mother, who manages her career even more so. OnlyFans obviously exploited her. After all, it's what they do to all of the women who buy their lies and end up in places that they never intended or wanted to go. But who else exploited this girl? Some people argue that the men who participated in this 100-man challenge exploited her. But the most that I'm willing to say is that, like her, they exploited each other and themselves. But I don't know how you can argue that they exploited her any more than she exploited them, given that this was her idea, and one that she willingly engaged in every step of the way. But I have yet to hear anyone point to perhaps the biggest exploiter of all in this tragic story, themselves. If you help to promote the lie that going down this road will never mean finding yourself in a place that you profoundly regret being in, a life that you feel trapped by, and one that will leave you profoundly damaged, then you helped to deceive this young woman. And you contributed to what got her here. And most of those yous that I'm talking to right now are other women. This is especially true of the other women who are on OnlyFans. It is women like them, with their misplaced loyalty to a cause instead of to each other, who perpetuate this lie that they feel good about themselves while doing these things. They clearly do not. And the few women who actually do are sociopathic predators. But both groups succeed in convincing an awful lot of women to destroy their lives by following in their footsteps. And I'm not going to let them off the hook for that, just because we are both women, and that supposedly means that we are on the same team in the overly simplistic culture war world that we live in. Young people often lack the discernment to see the difference between a sincere performance and an obligatory display that is made in order to save face, because your pride won't allow you to just say that you made a bad decision, as we all have done at some point. I don't judge you for that, but I do judge you for sacrificing more young women to the unhappiness that you have personally experienced and therefore know how much they will suffer, all in order to spare your own pride. That is monstrous. To value another human being less than your petty temporary feelings. And I also judge the women who have cleared the way for all of this by putting their feminist cause above the truth when it came to things like calling Cardi B's WAP female empowerment in front of the young women who looked up to them because they didn't know any better. Shame on every single one of you. And you each know who you are. Speaking of judging people, judging is a concept that plays into all of this too. We are now living in a world where we have sanctified the idea of not judging people, but it has reached a point now that is bordering on dystopian. In Aldous Huxley's novel, Brave New World, it is considered unforgivably rude to refuse to have sex with anyone who wants to have sex with you. After all, what right do you have to refuse if it makes someone else feel less than? Do you believe that you are better than they are? Don't you believe in equality? We are honestly starting to border on that dystopia as a society right now, at least as far as our perceptions go, even if it does not yet fully extend to our actions. After all, to reject anyone is essentially being inherently judgy. Yes! Right! Good! You should be judgy when it comes to who you decide to include in your life. You should value yourself enough as a person to do that. If we've reached the point where the things that once went without saying now need to specifically be said once again, then fine, I'll say them. You are not a piece of meat. You should not make yourself available to anyone that is willing to pay for you, as though you are just another commodity in the marketplace. You are more than that. And it is okay to know that you are more than that. You should not rank knowing what you are worth below your desire to be fair to everyone who wants to use you. I know many women who don't want to be thought of as being judgy when it comes to the men that they get involved with. But that is one of the places in life where it is actually good to be judgy. It is okay to say that a man has to have his shit together in order to be good enough for you to consider being with him. And it is okay for him to say that you have to have your shit together in order for you to be good enough to be with him. There is nothing wrong with having standards. That is part of valuing yourself appropriately as a human being who has some inherent worth. Arrogance only comes into it when you value yourself disproportionately, so don't do that. But you should value yourself correctly. Regulating someone else's feelings is not your job. It's good to care about other people and their feelings, but it is not good to behave as though keeping those feelings properly balanced is somehow your responsibility in life. Other people's feelings are their responsibility, and you certainly don't owe them a piece of yourself in order to spare their feelings. It is okay to value yourself too much to treat yourself like a cookie that you give away as a treat in order to make some broken person feel better or in order to avoid making them feel worse. It is insane that we now live in a world that is attempting to shame straight men for not being willing to sleep with other men who are trans and identify as a woman, because it will hurt that trans person's feeling if the straight man doesn't agree with their self-perception and prove it by having sex with them. No one is obligated to sleep with anyone for any reason, no matter how PC that reason is. And the only people who need to be publicly shamed right now are the people who are trying to bully strangers into having obligatory pity sex with someone that they don't want to sleep with, all so that it will not offend that third party's political worldview. Who do people think they are to even try and push themselves onto other people to that degree? The rest of us have got to reach a point where we are willing to say clearly and unashamedly, no, I do get to reject people for any reason that I see fit. I decide who I want to be with and who I don't want to be with, whether that's judgy or not. And the truth is that we all should be judgy when it comes to deciding who will make us happy. That is healthy, not to mention the only route to succeeding in the goal of finding a person who will make you happy. If a woman meets a man who is contributing nothing to the world around him, who has no ambitions or goals, who is unwilling to take on any responsibilities, who engages in criminal activities, is addicted to drugs, cheats on you, lies to you, and is verbally abusive to you whenever he gets upset, then it is okay to say, that's not good enough for me. I realize that we now live in a world where you are never supposed to say that anyone is not good enough as is, regardless of their poor choices, but that doesn't make it any less true. Judging them in the sense that you have some basic standards and that what they are offering you does not meet those standards is not the same thing as saying that they have no value as a human being. Is it the same thing as you saying that you're better than they are? As in worth more? Well, I mean, they're human beings too, and all life is sacred, so no, it's not true in that sense. But is it true in the sense that you are bringing more to the table than they are? Well, if they're the guy that I just described, then yeah, you probably are. That's not being judgy to acknowledge the truth about the reality of the situation. Saying that you want someone who brings the same amount to the table as you do, and that you won't settle for less than that, is not being judgy. You're looking for a partner, right, ladies? You don't want to be in it alone with a man-child that you have to play mommy to. That's not having a relationship. That's being a single parent. Likewise, if a good man is looking for a woman who can be a partner to him in his life, someone that he can build a family with, etc., and he sees a woman who isn't going to be faithful in the long run, who likes to party and do drugs, who isn't responsible or reliable, who doesn't value herself and is on OnlyFans, does he have the right to say that she is not what he's looking for, even if it hurts her feelings and makes her feel judged? Of course he does. That's not being mean. That's being honest enough to not waste her time with something that is clearly not a good fit right from the start and will therefore make neither one of them happy. It's never fun to be on the receiving end of that type of honesty, but for the most part, it's the people who get their feelings hurt when they fall short of reasonable standards, who consider having them at all to be the same thing as being judgy. But once again, judging people in the sense of correctly valuing yourself and having the self-awareness to know what is and what is not going to contribute positively to your life is an entirely good thing to do. Lacking those standards and or the ability to be honest about them will not result in you just lucking into the high-quality relationship or fulfilling future that you want. If you set a low bar, the world is not going to raise it just to be nice. You should be judgy about who is worth spending the very finite amount of time that you get to have during your one and only life. If you're not judgy in that sense, then you will waste your life on a lot of people and things that only lead you further away from the life that you actually want to have. And for what? Because it will be over before you know it. And who exactly is going to give you a medal for being PC in the end? Being judgy is the first step to forming a family. You are making the judgment that this person is more capable of making you happy and better suited to building the life that you're aiming for than the person who happens to be standing next to them. And if you truly love that person, which is more than just having the fuzzy feeling that is associated with being in love, then you will want to be the kind of person who will enhance their life as much as they are enhancing yours. Mixing up love itself with the feeling that is associated with it has been the source of a lot of confusion for a lot of young people. Loving someone is a choice, not a feeling. Attraction is a feeling, and it is a necessary part of love, but it is not love itself. The warm, fuzzy feeling that makes you feel good inside is often the result of loving someone, but it is not love itself either. You can have that same feeling without it being love. Love is a choice. Love is choosing to prioritize what is best for the other person above what you want for yourself, which is exactly how refusing to enable an addict is the loving thing to do. It doesn't make them happy when you won't enable their addiction. And it doesn't make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside either, often quite the opposite. But it is the loving thing to do, because that is loving them enough to want what is best for them, even if it is difficult for you. Love is choosing to live that way, relationally prioritizing someone else's well-being. It is valuing them enough to make the appropriate sacrifices that are needed in order to become the person that the best version of them deserves to have in their life. That is what makes real love strong enough to mean something and to last. That is what makes it valuable enough to be worth seeking it out and building your life on it. That is also what makes it so incredibly hard to find and to maintain. It is all well and good to say that you want to find love. But do you want it enough to do that in order to have it? To live every day that way? Because if you don't, that's fine. But it isn't just going to fall into your lap for anything less than all that you have to give so that you can build it. Christopher Hitchens advised us that in life we must choose our regrets. So which regrets can you live with? The answer to that is going to vary from one person to the next, but we have to start by at least being honest with ourselves instead of continuing to be loyal to all of the trendy ideologies that have definitely failed us so far. Are you going to regret not going to bed with that really hot guy more than you're going to regret feeling like an object who meant nothing to him over the course of the months that follow your one-night stand? I realize that the counter-argument is always going to be, what if he doesn't treat me like an object and walk away the next morning? What if this is the one time that it all works out exactly like it always does in every rom-com that we've been force-fed? Aside from that whole fishing for a good man in the pool of sociopaths argument, one really good way to assess the likelihood of him being the kind of guy who will be there for you before you go to bed with him is to see how he handles hearing the word no. Because at some point in your relationship, he is going to hear that word from you, and then what? Why waste 6 months? You might as well start off by finding out how he handles things when life doesn't go his way. It's better than wasting everyone's time on something that will never work out. It's better than sleeping with him and then figuring out the type of guy that he really is. Testing the waters right off the bat beats adding another regret onto a growing pile of one-night stands that you'll have to carry around with you for the rest of your life. We all have to choose which regrets we can live with carrying around with us. At the end of your life, can you live with the regret of having spent it alone and resentful more than you can live with the sacrifices that you will have to make in order to have healthy relationships with other people? Can you live with cutting off your family and friends in order to avoid any unpleasant differences in viewpoints and trying to sustain yourself just on you more than you can live with learning how to negotiate those differences in a healthy way as you compromise and accept the good with the bad? Can you live with walking away from a toxic relationship or one that is not improving your life? More than you can live with settling for that, and only that, as you miss out on what you really want from life. Can you live with not ever being a parent and not having that fundamental human experience, which will provide you with a sense of having left behind a legacy that will continue on after you're gone, more than you can live with the sacrifice that you may have to make when it comes to delaying your career until they're grown, because it turns out that maybe you can't have it all at the same time and you'll have to prioritize. Can you live with being a good soldier in the feminist army, even if it results in your leading a life that makes you bitter and resentful until the day you die? What is a woman? How is she different from a man? Are those differences okay and even good? Is it healthy to suppress what a woman is in order to try and be as male as possible because that is how we have decided to define success? Is it okay for each of us to embrace the woman that we are, which will be based on our own unique combinations of individual traits? These are the fundamental questions of our lives, girls. And it's time that women gave themselves permission to start asking these questions once again. I thank you for tuning in this week and for hanging in there with me. I hope you will continue to hang in there with me in the weeks that come. And if you did enjoy today's episode, please like and follow, because that is what makes these things successful. And I hope I will see you again next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.